and welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Fried, and I am joined, as always, by my good friend, Mike Luciano. Mike, I'm feeling good, buddy. More importantly, I'm feeling emotions about the New York Jets that I have not felt in a very long time. This past Monday, Aaron Glenn's introductory press conference, as well as General Manager Darren Mougey, I felt things. I'm scared. I'm excited. But I'm scared because I'm letting my guard down. And I know what happens when I feel things about the New York Jets. Bad things tend to happen afterwards. But I think a wise man once said, Mike, that it's better to have loved a shitty football team and lost than to have never loved a shitty football team at all. I think that was Albert Einstein who said that.
Was it like Confucius?
No, Albert Einstein.
Lao Tzu,
notably one of the great philosophers of our era, Albert Einstein. But I'm feeling excited, cautiously guarded about the situation, but pumped up nonetheless. How are you feeling today? A couple days after that press conference, we're going to talk about the Darren Mougey hire. We're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers' future, some assistant coaches. But first, Mike, how are you feeling right now, buddy? 2 days after that press conference.
Much like Socrates over there, I'm feeling pretty good in the sense that if this whole coaching thing doesn't work out, Aaron Glenn has an amazing public speaking career ahead of him because as an orator, he is exceptional. As a motivator, he is exceptional. We'll get into Aaron Glenn. We'll get into Darren Mougey. We'll get into a bunch of other things. Connor Long, one of our members, and who has a great show himself, says Mark and Justin, even though it's Mike and Justin, I will accept Mike and Justin. There we go.
Weirdly, Mark's my dad's name. I don't know if anyone cares, but there you go.
Mike and Justin. So thank you for the correction, Connor. Thanks for tuning in. To be like Connor, all you got to do is pay 99 cents a month, and you'll join our membership program, and we'll read your comments for anybody else's because you'll get priority reply. 99 cents a month. That's a sixth of a cup of coffee. So 6 of those or 1 cup of coffee. 6 months of Jet Press support or 1 cup of coffee.
Sure.
Do your math. You can also find us for free on all the podcast apps, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there. And we're on YouTube at the Jet Press. So subscribing, big help. Thumbs up, big help. That's how you support the show for free. But let's go. Now that we got the housekeeping out of the way, we got a very busy show for a January 29th show with a new coaching staff in. So let's talk about Aaron Glenn and Darren Mougey, especially Mougey I want to get into later because it seemed for all the world, like during last year, they were going to hire Lance Newmark, who was the assistant general manager of the Washington Commanders. And I don't know if he just got up and took a crap on the desk or started making monkey sounds. I don't know what he could have done in the span of time between then and now, but he apparently bungled that interview so badly, the Jets had to go in a different direction. They end up with Darren Mougey as the general manager. But let's get to Glenn first because he was the rock star. And I really do know, and I really do get that no one related to the Jets, as Connor Long gifts 10 memberships. Thank you, Connor Long. We got so many new members. Thanks to Connor, we got Fonz, we got Donna, we got EJ, we got Ray, Danger, Titan. All these guys are all new members. Thank you guys so much. 10 new members, and you guys, if you reply at all, you'll get the priority reply in the comments. Connor,
you're the man. Thank you so much, Connor.
You are the man, Connor.
I just
Long.
was on Connor's show the other week. Does amazing stuff. Go check him out on YouTube. He's fantastic, and apparently he's very generous as well. Thank you so much, Connor. Thank you to Fonz, Philip Hannon, DW, Donna, EJ, Ray Danger, Titan, Sunday Night Smoke Podcast, Patrick Cahill, and Ryan Moss. Thank you guys. You're all now members of the Jet Press Podcast and our YouTube channel. I thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it, Connor.
Connor, you rock. You are number 2 or maybe number 1 with Aaron Glenn, but you're certainly 1 and 1A with Aaron Glenn right now. Because I know genuinely no fan wants to hear he won the press conference. And really there's no correlation to winning the press conference. Liam Cohen had a weird moment. I think he'll be fine. Dan Campbell and Nick Sirianni lost their press conferences. They've been great so far. Robert Saleh won his. Actually, Awful Announcing put out a pretty good article about all the coaches who won the press conference. As Connor says, keep up the great work. Thank you, Connor. Of all the coaches who won the press conference, it was like Hugh Jackson and all these horrible guys who have won the press conference. Saleh especially. Now, sometimes it works out. Adam Gase lost the press conference and he was terrible. So I get nobody wants to hear about Aaron Glenn being great in the press conference because that's what we thought he'd be. Everybody who heard him talk for 5 minutes, knows this guy's a great orator, a great leader. He can get you interested. He could tell me to go and clean my bathroom toilet, and I'd be interested and motivated in him. But he just came with this edge and this spice to him. And not just like because he used the language like we're the freaking Jets and we're built for this shit. Not even that. He has this, and I really don't want to go dumb it down to this level or use this word because it's been dumbed down a lot. Yes. But there's an aura about it.
He's aura farming. Let's go.
If I may paraphrase Buffalo Jet fan, he does not seem like the guy who would get bullied by Brick Johnson and then talk to Diana Rossini and Zach Rosenblatt about it. This guy is a man. And this guy, for better or worse, is going to do things his way. I don't live by a ton of those like, catchy, statements or little sayings. But one I can't remember where I heard it. Make your mistakes, don't make somebody else's mistakes in life. Aaron Glenn, I don't know. He's going to make mistakes. No coach is perfect, but he's going to do things his way. And I am totally bought into what Aaron Glenn's way is going to be. Especially because one thing I liked, he's already, from day one, helping control media narratives. He brought up Aaron Rodgers. He said, stop asking me these questions. He gets New York. We mentioned this on the last podcast before Justin came on halfway through when I was with Mike Giraputo. One of the problems at Robert Saleh was he had this naivete about him, where he thought, I'm just going to go do things like we did in San Francisco, and my defensive knowledge will fix this team. And then he got overwhelmed by just the Jets as an entity. Aaron Glenn has been through, he lived through the Rich Kotite years. Fans will argue, and you can't really argue back, that may have been the darkest era of Jets football was Rich Kotite. And he lived it personally. And he helped bring them out of it. He's still mad about that AFC Championship game. I bet some of our listeners are still mad about losing that AFC Championship game to Denver when they were up 10-0 at halftime and had all those turnovers. This is a guy, I don't know if he's going to do it, but I'd never felt more confident that a coach knows what he's getting into and has a plan of attack that he can fix it, really since Rex. And honestly, I think Aaron Glenn is a little bit more in my sort of opinion of him. I believe him a little bit more because he's lived it.
He speaks, he's very genuine when he speaks. And I think that comes across. I don't know if I've seen a head coach, and obviously let me make this clear from the start, just like you mentioned, Mike, just because you win a press conference doesn't mean anything, right? Dan Campbell lost his press conference, and look what he's been able to do for Detroit. Like it really doesn't mean a lot. But words alone aren't going to change this culture. Monday was a really, really good start for this organization. That was the first step in turning everything around. A very small step. The press conference is a very small step, but it matters. I don't know if I've seen a coach captivate a room like Aaron Glenn did on Monday in their first introductory press conference. It felt like people were in awe listening to him. Like it legitimately felt like people were just like, wow, this guy he's the real deal. Like he knows what he's doing. Like you said, he knows what he's getting into. He knows the market. He knows the media. He gets it. He's a New York Jet. And it's been a while since that has been a prideful statement. It's been a really long time, honestly, since someone has been able to say, we're the freaking New York Jets, and that's a statement of pride. But Aaron Glenn restored that feeling on Monday. I don't know if the wins are going to follow. I have no idea. I don't know how he's going to be doing it. I don't know how he's going to do as a head coach. A lot of that is beyond what we can already see. Like a lot of that is going to come down to his coaching staff. If he gets a quarterback, like there's so many other things. But in terms of the vibes, and I know that's a very silly thing to base it on, but in terms of the vibes, they're back. Like they are fully back. I am as bought into Aaron Glenn as I have been for any head coach that has been hired in my lifetime, within the first couple of days of their tenure. Aaron Glenn talks the talk. We'll see if he walks the walk. He's walked the walk already throughout his career, but I know that players are going to adore playing for him and that they're going to love him in that locker room. And that's all you could ask for right now. We'll see if they can get a quarterback. We'll see if they can get the right personnel in, the right coaching staff. That's all stuff that we analyze and we talk about. But as far as Monday's concerned, he kicked ass. That was a rock star performance in that press conference.
And here's another reason to be optimistic about Aaron Glenn, especially comparing it to Robert Saleh. There's a lot of, I think, revisionist history going on with Saleh and stuff that I don't think is fair, like calling him a fake tough guy and stuff like that. I don't think that's fair. I do think looking back on it, the comparison between all gas, no brake and this, it's night and day. All gas, no brake, I will say, looking back on it, does seem a little corny for a guy who's supposed to be this big, ripped, angry meathead guy and yelling on the sideline. That seemed a little bit like camp counselor stuff. And you can do camp counselor stuff Like Pete Carroll does that all the time. He has like, be honest with yourself, tell the truth Tuesdays and work out Wednesday. Like he has shit like that, but he's Pete Carroll and he won a Super Bowl and probably should have won too. So you're allowed to do that. Robert Saleh didn't have that cachet yet. Here's why I'm excited about it too, because you look at this roster, they went 5-12 last year. As Brian Sternbeck says, walking the walk doesn't mean running up the stairs on game day. No, it doesn't. No, it does not. Here's why you're excited. They were 5-12 last year. This is not a 5-12 roster. With Aaron Rodgers, whatever you think of Aaron Rodgers, this should not be a 5-12 roster. And we've counted probably 4 or 5 games last year that they lost. You can attribute to either Adam Gase level coaching from Jeff Ulbrich, who I'm glad that he admitted, now he's the Falcons defensive coordinator. I'm glad he admitted that he made a mistake keeping DC responsibilities, which is what we said for months. He's like, oh yeah, I made a mistake. Like, oh no shit. Now that he came to that realization, that's helpful. But 4 or 5 games, you could point to either that level of coaching or kicking that lost those games. If you believe Aaron Glenn is going to really harp on those details and motivate these guys, he's probably going to turn around some of those 3 or 4 games this year. I don't know if the Jets are a playoff team with this roster and Aaron Glenn, but you got to, I think, talk about him as probably sneaking into a wild card. You got to have that discussion if you really believe that Aaron Glenn, from a motivational point of view, from an organizational point of view, from a detail-oriented point of view, because he does seem a lot more detail-oriented, I will give him, than Saleh. Saleh wanted to be, I'm going to be CEO leadership guy. This is my Oberst's my defense. Mike LaFleur is my offense. Let's run it. Aaron Glenn's going to be very involved. Now, some may say, well, that's micromanaging. The Jets need a micromanager. They need someone to call people out on minor details, because minor details are part of where they lost all these games. So I'm very excited about Aaron Glenn. I know that you can't really predict wins and losses. I don't know if he's going to be good, but based on all the information we have right now, given his tenure in Detroit, which I know some people may not like to hire, this guy is certainly qualified to be a head coach. So overqualified to be a head coach. I have to be optimistic again. I was down on that coaching search, especially, I don't know if you guys saw that report from Albert Breer that mentioned if they didn't get Aaron Glenn, if you went to the Saints, their backup choices were Vance Joseph, Arthur Smith, and Jeff Hafley. The fact that this timeline happened where they got Aaron Glenn, you have to feel even better about it now.
There was this article that I just pulled up here. It was from The Athletic back in 2020, written by Dan Pompei, who did a feature story on Aaron Glenn. If there's anybody out there who's questioning Aaron Glenn's qualifications for this job, I definitely recommend checking that out. Goes through not only his tenure as a player, but his close relationship with Bill Parcells, his transition into the world of scouting and then later coaching. Aaron Glenn, for those who don't know, wanted to initially become a coach before going into scouting. That was a conversation he had with Bill Parcells, who is someone obviously he remains very, very, very close with. Bill Parcells endorsed Aaron Glenn after the hiring and was like, the Jets got it right. This is a great decision. And he's not just saying that. These guys talk every single week, sometimes every day. There was a conversation that Glenn had with Parcells after Glenn, because Glenn, after he retired back in 2008, wanted to kind of take a step back, become a family man. He was raising his kids. He was out of the world of football for a little bit. But he couldn't really fight that itch. And his wife eventually noticed that every day he'd be, during football season, he'd be watching football and he couldn't get enough of it. And his wife eventually told him, and this was all detailed in that story, which highly recommend going to check that out. His wife was like, I know you love this too much. You have to go back and coach, and you have to go back.
She's down with it. That's
she's supportive, and he listened and he agreed, but he wanted to become a coach immediately. Bill Parcells spoke to him and said, I don't think you're ready for this yet. This was back in 2012, right when he was brought on as a scouting assistant for the Jets. He wanted Glenn to go through the coaching route first, and Glenn initially balked at the idea, but eventually agreed. He has worked his way up through the scouting department for a couple of years with the Jets. Then he was an assistant DBs coach with the Browns, went to the Saints, was a DBs coach there until he finally became a defensive coordinator with the Lions. Now he's getting his head coach opportunity. He's worked under so many of the I would say some of the best coaching minds of the last few generations, from Bill Parcells, Sean Payton, another guy who, we've given shit on this podcast before. There was a whole thing with Hackett last year, which, hey man, look, he was right about that. Sean Payton has proven to be an excellent head coach. And it's another guy who Aaron Glenn speaks to almost daily. They talk all the time. And I think he's been able to learn from all of those different stops that he's gone to. And now here he is, and he's finally getting this head coaching opportunity. Again, I would highly recommend checking out that article. If you have any questions, honestly, just check it out regardless. But if you have any questions about Aaron Glenn's candidacy, his qualifications for this job, I don't know if you're going to find a more qualified candidate to be a head coach who wasn't already a head coach than Aaron Glenn. And like you said, Mike, I don't know if he's going to be a successful coach in the NFL. I don't know if he's going to be a successful head coach with the Jets. A lot depends on other things. And as far as if they're going to be a playoff team next year, I don't know. And we'll get into this more when we talk about the Aaron Rodgers situation and his future, because like a lot of that is going to depend on who the quarterback is for the Jets next year. But what I do know and what I care more about, more so than if they make the playoffs next year, I care less about that. I care if they're going to build a sustained winner. Dan Campbell, in his first year with Detroit, they won 3 games. There was a lot of people that, you could have been out on Dan Campbell after that year, especially, again, like we mentioned, the press conference was corny. A lot of people who might not have been exposed to that team were like, oh, they saw this, lunkhead, former football player saying stupid stuff in a press conference, and he leads a team to 3 wins. But the guys inside that building knew that change was there, that something was changing. Then the next year they win 9 games, and now look at them. They're one of the models of success in the NFL.
This is such a model the Jets took
Exactly.
to DC.
And their offensive coordinator got hired. Then the rest of their staff's getting rated. In 4 years, the Lions went from the laughingstock of the NFL to the model of success and sustainability in the league. That's what I care about. I don't care if the Jets make the playoffs this year. I don't. I'd love to end that streak. I'd love to cover a playoff game for the first time in my professional career. That'd be nice. But I care a lot more about them having sustained success and building a sustained winner. And I don't know if Aaron Glenn's going to be able to do that, but he certainly convinced me that he's capable of it on Monday.
Quick hitter before we change topics. Josh Kerr, do you know if Hackett is still part of the organization? I saw Keith Carter was let go. And if Hackett is fired, will Rodgers not be with us? Hackett's
gone regardless. If they bring back Rodgers, it has been pretty well communicated by this point that he will not have significant say in really anything that they do. That includes the coaching staff. That includes personnel. Sure, I imagine Devontae Adams would stay here because he'd probably want to play with Aaron Rodgers. But Aaron Rodgers...
And Devontae Adams is really good, so I would
isn't
enjoy
going
that.
to be able to protect Nathaniel Hackett's job anymore. Hackett is gone. I don't know. Honestly, I'm going to guess this is going to be another Adam Gase situation where we don't hear from the guy again, and he literally doesn't coach anywhere. That would be my guess, because who the hell is hiring Nathaniel Hackett?
Well, that would be the funny thing, because you hear all these other teams that aren't the Jets mentioned for Rodgers, like Raiders, Titans, teams like Steelers even. No one's going to hire him to be their OC again. But you don't think somebody would be like, hey, offensive assistant, quality control
I don't think
coach.
Rodgers has that pull anymore. Unless the team is willing to do it.
I think
he still has that. I don't think he still has that pull.
I don't think he has that pull anymore, but I think teams, again, the Jets have proven that's how desperate teams can be for quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers he's not what he was, but he might be, if he was on the free agent market, maybe outside of Darnold, he might be the best option. Still there, so teams might do that. It's not going to be
like when he came to New York, and this is a great way to put it that Brian said here. Rodgers no longer has a head coach or GM indebted to him or relying on his personal success. When the Jets took that Rodgers swing, when Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh hitched their wagon to Rodgers, it was Aaron Rodgers or bust. Either Aaron Rodgers was going to succeed in New York or they were going to get fired. Well, Aaron Rodgers didn't particularly succeed in New York, and they were both fired. But they knew they kind of had to bend to him a little bit. They needed to make sure that he was happy and that they put him in a position where he was going to have the best chance to succeed. I don't think he has that pull wherever he goes now. Sure, if the Steelers or the Raiders or whoever signs him, they're going to want him to succeed. But it's not like they're going to be indebted to him. I think indebted is a really good word that Brian used there. It's not going to be the same type of dynamic where the Jets regime was reliant on Aaron Rodgers' success. Any regime bringing in Rodgers now, the expectations are significantly tempered. They're not bringing him in expecting a top 10 quarterback with Super Bowl aspirations. They know he's a bridge starter. And I think those expectations would impact how much influence he has in the organization.
It's a shame because Denver was indebted to Peyton Manning and it worked, and Tampa was indebted to Tom Brady and it worked. And here we are. I will give Glenn credit, though, because we've gone back and forth about Rodgers. Justin, I think, is still in the don't bring him back camp because of the cap hit you will incur in the next 2 years, saying it might be better to just eat it this year, stink, lay the foundation, and then build upon that going forward. And we've gone back and forth this on Glenn, like me, you, and Mike in the last show, where, yeah, on one hand, and I get why Glenn is non-committal about this. I think he was right to be. Because on one hand, I don't want to let a Robert Saleh kind of Joe Douglas guy who didn't have a ton of success determine my future. Because Aaron Glenn is not guaranteed. I know he's a 5-year deal. There's no guarantee he stays that long. He might be gone in 2 years if he's terrible. So why hitch your wagon to guys that you didn't want to bring in? You bring in your guy. Every new regime does that. But also, purely from an X's and O's, how good are you at playing football point of view, he might be realistic. He might be the best quarterback option on the market. And if you're a defensive head coach and a first-time coach, it might be silly to look at a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who I think gives you, just in terms of your offense, just such a baseline of competency. I mean, this is probably the worst of Aaron Rodgers. He's still at, 28 touchdowns? I mean, that's a pretty good baseline to get for a first-year defensive coach. It might be foolish to look at that and say, you know what, we're going to get rid of that and draft from a weak quarterback class or sign Kirk Cousins as a bridge for a year or Justin Fields on a 2 with a 1-year option. I could see why those options aren't appealing right now for Aaron Glenn. The only reason I'm probably a little more confident moving forward with or without Rodgers is because we think Saleh was an okay coach who kind of got a raw deal because of stuff he couldn't control. I'm more interested in seeing what Aaron Glenn's going to do, and I think he's going to have a better plan of attack with Rodgers than just let him do everything. And I feel like Darren Mougey is going to have a better plan of attack than Joe Douglas, which was, all right, let Aaron Rodgers do everything, and I'll just fill holes as they pop up, being reactive instead of proactive. As much as I have some reservations about bringing Rodgers back, I'm so confident in Glenn and Mougey, I think I'd be more on their side if that's the route they want to go towards. Because it does seem like they're in lockstep, which the Jets, if there's one word that never applied to them in the last 10 years, I don't think lockstep organizationally is one of them. Now it seems like they kind of have it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Aaron Rodgers discussion is going to be the most important conversation of the entire offseason. It's arguably an even, I wouldn't say it's a more important decision than hiring Aaron Glenn, but it's up there. It's a very, very important decision that the new regime is going to have to make. And I'm hoping that new regime is allowed to make that. By all accounts, it seems like that's going to happen. For as much shit as Woody Johnson deserves for how he handled the last couple of years of the Douglas Saleh regime, he, for the most part, I mean, he was in London for some of this time, but he was kind of out of the picture for a while, as was Christopher Johnson, as was ownership. Douglas and Saleh were kind of doing their own thing up until the last couple of years when Woody started to intervene. So I trust that Woody Johnson is going to take a step back, which is a crazy thing to say that I trust Woody Johnson, but I do trust that he's going to take a step back, at least to start, and let them do their thing. And then if he thinks—
He always lets them do their thing to start.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Exactly. And then if things go poorly, then he'll step in and start ruining any chance they have.
Bobs and Brick and everybody else comes in.
The Jaime El Highs of the world and whatever the hell he even does. But yeah, I trust that he's going to let them make that decision. So I mean, I can't say that I'd like to say that I trust Aaron Glenn and Darren Mougey to make the right decision. I definitely don't not trust them, if that makes sense. I haven't been given any reason to not trust them, whereas stuff with Douglas and Saleh towards the end, I'm like, all right, you guys got a track record here. It's kind of hard for me to trust your evaluations. Whereas with Mougey and Glenn, it's a fresh slate. So I don't know if I trust their decisions. But I will say this. It's an extremely complicated discussion, and it's very easy to boil it down to Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback option for the Jets in terms of performance on the field in 2025. Therefore, he should be back. It's a very easy conversation. If you just boil it down to that, anybody's going to agree with that. Because
that is probably true, though. That's the
no. Exactly. I agree with that sentiment. I agree with the sentiment that if you want to compete in 2025, Aaron Rodgers is probably your best option. You're probably not going to be able to sign to Sam Darnold, and even then, who knows what Darnold would look like, outside of the Minnesota system. I don't. And also, do you want to pay him what he might be getting? There's a big conversation there.
Aaron Rodgers say he wants basically Baker Mayfield's deal, so that's 3 years, $100 million for Sam Darnold.
I don't know if I feel comfortable paying that, especially for a new regime. You got your cap hit situation. I don't know if I feel comfortable paying that. So Aaron Rodgers is probably your best option to compete in 2025. But there are numerous other discussions to be had about that. And I think I could boil it down to 3 different things, right? Cap hit is the first one for me. Finances are the most important aspect of this because I don't think a new regime coming in, specifically look at general manager Darren Mougey, I don't think he's going to want to hitch his wagon to 1 year of Aaron Rodgers with an outside chance of competing at the risk of not destroying is a bold word, but really hindering your chances of competing in 2026 and 2027. Because as we've ran through the numbers before, and again, this is all subject to change. If he takes a massive pay cut, this is a different conversation. I can only speak on what is and not hypothetical. So subject to change if he takes a pay cut. But what we do right now, if the Jets cut him right now, if they cut him this offseason and take that full cap hit up front, it is $49 million in dead cap. They can split it between 2025 and 2026 if they want to. I think I'd prefer to just take it up front, start fresh in 2026 with a new roster, with a much cleaner financial situation. That would be my preference, right? Or if you keep him this year, he's a $35 million option bonus that triggers the first week of the season, week 1. If he is on your roster, that roster bonus kicks in. Now, because he has void years after his deal, technically the last year of his contract is 2025, but he's got void years running all the way, I think, through 2028. So thank you for all that restructuring, Joe Douglas. Appreciate that. But yeah, if you keep him on your roster, now that dead cap hit rises to $63 million, which is a big difference. And not only is it a big difference in terms of the quantity, you're now pushing that dead money even further into the future, because you're likely not going to take a $63 million dead cap hit up front, because Jesus Christ, you're talking about not competing. You're not going to compete in 2026.
Didn't Denver basically do that where Russ was like $40 million up front?
To do so, you need a quarterback on a rookie contract who plays well immediately in his rookie season, because they're probably not drafting anyone that's going to start this year. You need a lot to go right. Denver was the exception, not the rule. It's possible. But
where did our guy come from, though? Our new guy come from?
Sure. If he thinks he can replicate that, I mean, I wouldn't say go for it because I don't want him to do that. It's possible. I don't think you're setting yourself up for success by doing that, but it's possible to compete in any way in the NFL. We're talking percentages here. We're talking probabilities. So I don't think they're going to take that $63 million dead cap hit up front, which would mean that they split it between 2026 and 2027, which I believe would give you $42 million in dead cap hit in 2027. Brian is getting a little clarification here. So they're not void years. They're actual seasons in OTC regards as void years because they think Rodgers is unlikely to play those years. Interesting. I mean, yeah, regardless, he's basically under contract, to my knowledge, through 2025. And then anything after that is a
fun with numbers. You can play with it.
Yeah, it's almost like how Devontae Adams technically has a couple more years under his contract right now.
Well, Sternbeck puts out he's under contract for around $22 million each season.
Yeah, the
26
the cap hit is not like the cap hit. The actual cap hit itself is not the issue. His cap hit this year, if he's on the roster, is only $22 million, I believe. It's very, very affordable. Even
dead cap when you get rid of him.
It's the dead cap when you move on. That's the issue here. And so I don't think a new regime is going to want to commit to one more year of Rodgers. By doing so, give yourself $42 million in dead cap 3 years in the future. I don't think any regime is going to want to do that. So that's number one. I know it's a long point to make. Two more points on the more complicated discussion around Aaron Rodgers. His injury and his age. I think it needs to be discussed because, well, sure, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, and when he was healthy this year, we saw him play at a pretty high level. Like I thought there were games this year in when he had good situations, when he was healthy, when the offensive line protected him, when he was playing
early and late when he was healthy.
He was good. I don't trust a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers who has been hurt each of the last 3 years to be healthy for a full season. I just don't. And that's an aspect you have to consider. It's not like, oh, yeah, we bring Rodgers back. He's going to be healthy and he's going to play at this level. No, we just saw him play like shit for half the year because he was hurt. I have no faith that he's going to be able to stay healthy, especially adding another year will be 42. I have no faith that he would stay healthy for that full season. And then the third part of it, and this also relates to like what would Aaron Rodgers want? This is more the emotional part of it, where you are resetting the organization. You are starting fresh, new coaching staff, new everything. I don't think it's wise, given how much influence Aaron Rodgers has had over the organization, over the coaching staff, over the offensive system and everything, to have him still around. And even though you could say like, oh, he's not going to have this influence, he's still Aaron Rodgers. He's going to try to do certain things. And I don't blame him. He's been done this his entire career. This isn't me being like, Aaron Rodgers is toxic.
And it worked every year except one.
Right. And this is not me saying like Aaron Rodgers is toxic. That's not my point here at all. Because I don't even by all accounts, he was beloved by the teammates. I don't think that that's the situation I'm referring to here. I'm just saying that you're bringing in a new regime, new coaching staff. I don't think it makes a ton of sense to keep Aaron Rodgers around for that new regime, because you're now going to bring in a new offensive coordinator, whether that's Tanner Engstrom or whoever, and they're going to implement their system. They're going to implement their scheme. I don't want Aaron Rodgers having influence over that scheme. And I don't want him, because it's Aaron Rodgers. He's going to have influence regardless on that offensive scheme. wherever he goes, he's still going to have that influence. Even if it's not, hey, we're going to have to hire Nathaniel Hackett, he's still going to be making changes at the line of scrimmage. He's going to have that authority. And, a lot of people criticized, hey, the Jets didn't really have a good pass run balance last year. They didn't run the ball a lot. A lot of that was Aaron Rodgers just changing plays at the line of scrimmage. I don't want that with the new regime. I want to start fresh. That's probably in order of most significant to least significant. I think the cap hit's the most significant. Then it's the injury stuff. Then it's that stuff. But all of those aspects to the conversation are why it's more complex than just Aaron Rodgers is your best option for 2020.
Today, January 29th, what do you think they do? Keep him or get rid of him?
I think they move on still. I think it's a better chance that they keep him now than I did a few weeks ago, but I still think they move on.
I will say, because I remember when Saleh got hired, and they were talking up Sam Darnold, and they knew they were going to get rid of Sam Darnold. I think for him to go out of the way in the introductory press conference to be like, hey, we don't know yet.
Right.
That's either incredible candor, which I think he has, or he's just like, look, I really don't want it. It's the best I can do. I don't want to say we're getting rid of him in an introductory press conference.
Yeah, that was he knew he was going to be asked that question. So he said, hey, we don't have an answer for you. And I believe that. I don't think they know. I don't think they have an answer yet. I think they're going to wait until they hire some more front office executives, until they bring in their offensive coordinator, bring in an offensive staff. They're going to have a discussion. I'm sure they know one way or another.
We're talking like this about Glenn, too. Like, if they're bringing in a first-time coordinator, who do you want to work with, Justin Fields or Aaron Rodgers? Who'd be better for your offense?
I mean,
Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers?
I think that's actually a discussion, because I think Aaron Rodgers, if you have a new offensive coordinator and he's implementing his system, Aaron Rodgers is going to have a lot of influence over that system and make it somewhat his own. And I don't think that's best for a young offensive coordinator.
We'll talk about coordinators later. Let's go talk about some GM guys right now, because the Jets right now hired a new general manager, Darren Mougey.
Yes, sir.
And the funny thing about Mougey is, for some reason, Lance Newmark got viewed as this almost like toxic. People really didn't like Lance Newmark, which I thought was weird.
Who didn't like people around the league?
I don't know. There's just this I don't know about Lance Newmark.
Yeah, there was and take this with a grain of salt, because it's Tony Pauline of Sportskeeda, I believe, is his newest venture. He's
dear
reports in the past, but he said that people around the league believe that the Jets dodged a bullet by not hiring Lance Newmark.
Yeah, because they're like, oh, he did all that time in Detroit and all that, and he didn't really do a lot. Well, if you look at Darren Mougey, 39 years old, tall guy, 6'6".
Yep.
Had a cup of coffee. He went to San Diego State, played for 4 years as a quarterback and a receiver. Had a cup of coffee, with the Falcons and the Cardinals. Then he's only worked with Denver for the last 13 years, and he started from the bottom and worked his way up, much like Glenn did in a way.
He was an intern.
Scouting intern, area scout when they won the championship with John Elway as the GM, or the president of football operations. Assistant director of college scouting, director of player personnel, assistant general manager, and now general manager of the New York Jets. The weird thing is, Denver was not a particularly successful organization after that Super Bowl. They had the longest drought besides the Jets of making the playoff. This year was the first time since the Super Bowl they made it. It's the old Newmark riddle, where some people are saying, well, he did all that work for an organization that didn't win. And I get that. The pro-Newmark argument, I think part of the pro-Mougey argument is, well, they kept firing people left and right because those organizations were bad, and they kept him, and he kept moving up.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, with all of this, we have to keep Darren Mougey, which I think is something. GMs, as we said, are notoriously hard to predict. I would argue, just as a candidate, Joe Douglas was more qualified than Darren Mougey.
Oh, yes, I agree with that.
Not considerably, but I think Joe Douglas was a more qualified candidate, and he ended up being not a very good GM.
He was one of the most qualified GM candidates at that time. Obviously, the Jets didn't hire him at a normal time. They hired him in June because of that whole mess. But if that was a normal GM cycle, if that was in January, he would have been top 3 candidate.
I see all these people, because Alec Hallaby is basically the new Joe Douglas, the assistant with the Eagles. Every Eagles fan's like, no, don't hire Alec Hallaby. He's key to our success. I'm like, well, the Jets hired Joe Douglas. You're doing fine, actually better. And then the Jets got screwed for 6 years. So it's tough to predict. All I can really judge Darren Mougey on, because again, we don't know what George Payton was doing. We don't know what John Elway was doing. We don't know what he was doing. Front office responsibilities are very up in the air. And obviously, I'm not going to hold it against Darren Mougey for not being as good a public speaker as Aaron Glenn. That's hard to do.
I thought he did fine in the press
Did
conference.
okay.
Yeah,
But, when you're next to Aaron Glenn, it's like Godfather 3, where that was an okay movie next to 1 and 2.
It definitely feels like the GM, because last year, or in the last regime that they had with Saleh and Douglas, I know Douglas didn't speak to the media a lot, but it was very much understood that Douglas kind of was the one running the show. He kind of controlled the operation. It almost feels like it's going to be Glenn doing a little more of the.
Yeah,
Mougey is still the GM, but I think the dynamic is a little different there, where Mougey
is Seattle with Pete Carroll.
Yes,
Schneider's the GM, but we're picking Pete Carroll's players in the draft.
Which is very interesting for a first-time head coach, but Glenn's got a reputation to him, and I mean, look, he's definitely has an aura to him.
And the Jets wanted him above Jeff Hafley, so they had to do something.
Yes.
So it's tough to predict future success. I could go off what I've seen. What I've seen is the last couple of years he helped turn Denver around in an elevated role with Sean Payton. Now, I know he hired Nathaniel Hackett and was part of that. You can't get away from that.
As Brian said, I'd love for Mougey to be able to tell us what his process to led to his franchise hiring Nathaniel Hackett in 2022. I did also, when I was doing some research on Mougey, did see that not only did the Broncos obviously hire Hackett, Mougey kind of had a decent say, by all accounts, in that hiring. In fact, when the Broncos were doing their final interviews with their head coach candidates back in 2022, it was not Elway who met with Hackett for that final time. It was Darren Mougey. Darren Mougey had a one-on-one meeting over dinner with Nathaniel Hackett. 2 days later, the Broncos hired him.
Well, at least he doesn't have to hire coaches. At least
I'm just passing along information.
Theoretically, they got their coach in Aaron Glenn, so as long as he doesn't have to do that. Yeah. And if Glenn sucks, they're probably both fired anyway, so there you go. Doesn't have to do that. Helped turn Denver around. Seemingly is drafted okay. I mean, they're not like hitting home runs, but I know George Payton's the GM, but Bo Nix looks okay. Nick Bonito, pretty good pick. They've made some nice like Zach Allen in free agency, the John Franklin Myers trade. There's a lot of nice little moves that he's been a part of. I don't know if that'll translate. I don't know how much power he's going to have, because it seems like Aaron Glenn is kind of the commandante overlooking everything. But I think the Jets made a pretty decent GM hire. I just don't get why he's viewed so much better than Lance Newmark, when I think they have very similar resumes. Newmark's is just a little bit longer, and Newmark, I don't know how he bungled that interview and somehow found out that he was like a bullet that they had to dodge, and Darren Mougey is viewed as this really good candidate. That's what I don't get.
I think I would have Mougey slightly higher than Newmark, but they're in a similar-ish tier. Like, neither was my top tier of GM candidates, but also there's a reason we didn't make a GM tier list like we did head coaches, because it's how the hell are we supposed to, like us? We're not people in the building. We don't talk to these executives much. Like, there's no way that we can sit here and say, oh, this guy's going to be a good GM candidate. Like,
and Joe Douglas warped my brain because he was supposed to be like the best one.
And the thing is, I often agreed with Joe Douglas's process too, which is what makes this so shitty. Like, I mean, I was the one pounding the table, being like, "Hey, sign Mike Williams, sign Tyron Smith," and then Brick listened, and then here's what we got. But yeah, I like Darren
for Rodgers. Well,
yeah, I know. But yeah, Lance Newmark, dude, all-time bag fumbler. That's crazy, because it seemed like a sure thing that he was going to be a package deal to Aaron Glenn. That's what everyone expected. They brought them both in together to interview the same day. And then the Jets came away being like, all right, we got our guy in Aaron Glenn. And then they talked to Lance Newmark, and they're like, all right, we got to interview some other guys.
They had him. They had it in the bag.
Imagine fumbling so hard that you are the only candidate.
At that job too, especially that.
Right. You're the only candidate that this team brings in for a second interview. You're literally the only known finalist for this job, and they've already settled on hiring the head coach who you personally,
your friend who wants them to hire you,
right? And you fuck up so bad that they're like, all right, we got to talk to other guys. This clearly isn't working out. I don't know what happened in that interview, but I mean, who knows? It could have just been differing philosophies. Maybe they had different visions. Whatever.
Could have been a money thing.
It could have been. I like to think of it as he messed up the interview so bad that they had to bring in other people, because I think that's funny. But yeah,
I can't believe it.
Yeah,
because how many, like, some of these hires, like when people bring in new coaching staff, like freaking Josh McDaniels with the Patriots, it's like, did you need to do an interview process? Like, you knew that he was coming when you hired Vrabel.
And
Like, you wouldn't even had to do an interview process for some of these guys. That's how much of a lock it looked like Lance Newmark was going to be.
how about the PR job for the Vikings guys, by the way? Because it seemed like, I mean, for a while we heard, Brian Flores or Aaron Glenn. Like, Brian Flores might be the runner-up. Sounds like he wasn't even one of the 3 or 4 candidates they were considering.
For any of them, which I thought was weird.
They would consider Jeff Hafley and Arthur Smith over Brian Flores. My God, man. And then Ryan Grigson, there were reports, Flores and Grigson might be a package deal. Nobody was considering Grigson for a GM job. And thank goodness for that, for the Jets' sake.
Feel bad for Brian Flores, though. I think he got not a great shake.
I think,
like him better than Brian Schottenheimer. I'll tell you that much.
There was some.
What on earth was that?
We didn't get to talk about
9:45 on a Friday news dump. Brian Schottenheimer.
Others have said this on Twitter and around before, but we want to talk about this really quick. The Jets, for as much as they got clowned for the 33 different candidates that they brought in for their head coach and GM jobs, probably conducted one of the most successful and normal interview processes of this cycle, other than maybe like the Bears, who got Ben Johnson. I mean, the Patriots, I guess they got Mike Vrabel, but their entire process was a sham. And then look at what's going on around the league in Jacksonville, in Dallas. Like, goddamn, man. And New Orleans might not. Who the hell is New Orleans? They're going to hire Kellen Moore.
I'd be okay with Kellen Moore, honestly.
Oh, man. Kellen Moore. If Kellen Moore was the Jets head coach, how would you feel right now?
Pretty happy. I'm a Kellen Moore fan.
No, man, I'm not.
How you see how this offense is rolling? Looks pretty good to me.
I'm not with Kellen Moore.
Everywhere he's gone, his offense is good.
I'm not with Kellen Moore as a head coach candidate. But besides the point, look at what happened in Jacksonville with the whole Trent Baalke situation. In Dallas, firing McCarthy. Hilarious situation, by the way, with the report, I think it was yesterday, that Mike McCarthy has decided to pull out of the race and is going to focus on 2026. No, he didn't. The Saints didn't want to hire him. And so he's like, all right.
It did seem like the Saints did want to hire him for a little
while. And then clearly there were reports that came out before that most recent report that their meeting did not go well, that they were on very different wavelengths about, I think it was about how much influence and how much say he should have. My understanding of how that situation went down. Dallas fired Mike. I know we're going on a tangent here, but this is fun to talk NFL. And so there was a crazy, crazy hiring cycle. Mike McCarthy was fine moving on from the Cowboys because he thought he would have a lot of interest in the open market, which I get why he would think that. He had a lot of success in Green Bay, did a good job in Dallas. On paper, his resume is really strong. I just don't think the league sees it that way. I don't think they cared as much about that reputation. So he hit the open market, and there were teams that he thought would probably have interest in him that didn't. And, the Saints showed preliminary interest. They showed some interest, and I think they were willing to bring him on, but I think it was a difference in how much influence he wanted to have.
He wanted to be the GM, and Mickey
Loomis was too much guy, and he thinks, like Pete Carroll coming into Vegas, or Mike Vrabel going into New England. He thought he had the pull, like he thought he had that reputation that he could do that. He didn't, and I think he realized that pretty quickly. And so it's very funny that the report comes out yesterday where he's like, "Oh, I'm actually going to pull out of the head coach. I'm not going to be a coach this cycle. I'm focusing on 2026." That's not what happened. The NFL said no to him, and he went back with his tail between his legs. Anyway. That's a tangent.
I just find it funny. Like, remember those high-powered Jets offense? You ever think we're watching a future head coach in Brian Schottenheimer?
No. And that's what's so funny.
If his name was Brian Smith.
Right.
I don't even think he gets that coordinator job. I think that's Schottenheimer name.
What's so funny about it is that if you go back 2 weeks ago, whenever McCarthy was fired or let go 2-3 weeks ago, and you tell both the Cowboys and McCarthy, hey, this is how things are going to develop, I don't think either of them makes that decision.
See, the Jets interview 33 people. They end up with Aaron Glenn, who I think everybody likes, and Darren Mougey, who I think, if he didn't get a GM job this year, probably would have got one next year.
It was a fine GM candidate. Like he was a fine.
And the Cowboys interview 4 people, including Leslie Frazier, and end up with Brian Schottenheimer.
Because Jerry Jones knows that people don't want that job. Like he needs somebody who is basically going to be his yes man.
Which is funny because that should be a great job.
Well, the real issue, and I want to talk about this because it's so interesting to me. Jerry Jones wants Jason Witten to be his head coach. I think that is a very
Dion.
He clearly wants. I don't even think he wants Dion. He wants Jason Witten. The issue is that Jason Witten, to my knowledge, I don't believe he's ever been a coach at any level. Maybe high school or something.
He's a high school coach now.
He's not coaching in college. He's not coaching in the NFL. He has zero professional experience as a coach. So he realizes the optics of promoting or hiring Jason Witten right now probably wouldn't be very good. He understands that as much as he wants.
The Texans with Josh McCown. couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's similar to that, except Jerry wants to hire Jason Witten because he's a former Cowboy and he wants to just keep everything in the family in Dallas and all that shit. But so he wants to hire
Patriots did twice.
So he wants to hire Jason Witten. The issue is that everyone in the world, every coaching candidate knows that if they were to become the Cowboys head coach, they were to take that job, they're going to be replaced by Jason Witten in a couple of years. Because Jerry is, I'm telling you right now, Jason Witten is going to be on that Cowboys staff. I don't know what his role is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a tight ends coach. I don't know what offensive assistant, whatever it is. He's going to be on that staff. And the plan is he will be the head coach within the next 2 years. That would be my prediction right now. Schottenheimer, he's a placeholder. That's all he is. And I think he knows that. But the man's like 60 years old. He's never going to get a head coaching opportunity again. This is his only shot. So I don't blame the guy for taking it. But I don't blame anybody else for passing on that job. Kellen Moore, Kellen Moore had interest in that job. And it sounded like they wanted to hire Kellen Moore. But then he realized what the plan was. And that they're like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to be the mentor for my successor you already are planning to replace me with. And he was like, fuck that. I don't want to do that. Okay, anyway, there's a whole
back to Darren Mougey.
Sorry, it's a whole tangent. I just find this stuff so fascinating. And credit to the Jets for actually running a normal coaching cycle because Dallas is a sham. Jacksonville is a mess. New England was a sham. Darren Mougey, I'm happy with Mougey. I'm happy with this hire. I just went on a whole tangent there. Weird fun fact that we'll talk about in a second as well when we talk about the coordinator options. When Darren Mougey was at San Diego State, because he was a quarterback at San Diego State, that quarterback room consisted of Darren Mougey, future NFL general manager, Kevin O'Connell, future NFL head coach, and Tanner Engström, who is the current assistant, is passing game coordinator for the Detroit Lions, very likely a future NFL offensive coordinator. What a quarterback room at San Diego State.
I mean, it's funny too. Like you always look back on college is weird though, because I mean, Dwayne Haskins was picked over Joe Burrow twice, and it was probably the right move because Dwayne Haskins won the Rose Bowl through 50 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So college can be wonky. We'll get into the coordinator stuff, I think, now, because this is, I think, where Mougey can really flex his muscles, because so much of this is about connections with coordinators. It doesn't seem like Aaron Glenn's getting an experienced coordinator, because he already said, by the way, if you didn't catch it, he's not calling plays, which I think is probably the right move.
You don't think he's getting an experienced defensive coordinator?
Well, he's getting an experienced defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator.
Offensive, okay, yeah.
Offensive, I think, is going to be more important. Now, it seemed like their favorite was they wanted Nick Caley, who was a Belichick guy, and now he's the passing game coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. He's like the next Sean McVay guy in line. And I know that guys like Kyle Shanahan guys are kind of the flavor of the month. The success rate on the McVay guys, I mean, finding a McVay guy that hasn't really worked.
They've all been great.
They've all been good. Even Liam Cohen, Zach Robinson was pretty good in Atlanta, I think, this year. Obviously, I think the LaFleur brothers, both of them, I think are pretty good offensive minds.
I agree.
Like, that's the tree to go from.
Didn't Zach Robinson also work at PFF with Bobby Slowick? Weren't they both at PFF?
Yeah, Bobby Slowick wasn't even, for a while, he was just like a staff writer for PFF, Bobby Slowick.
Yeah.
He did like he literally was doing our job. And then the Jets almost made him head coach, and then he got fired 2 weeks later.
That's also crazy that they fired him. I couldn't believe that. That was a shocker.
Yeah, I thought he had the down year. I don't think he was fireable bad. I think everybody just got hurt.
I thought that he deserved another year given what he did in 2023, but what do I know?
Guess not. So now that it looks like Caley's out of the running because 2 new jobs will open up, one in Houston, as you mentioned before. And if you go to Houston, CJ Stroud, probably Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, easy division. You're expected to win it every year. That's a very attractive job for a coordinator. And then Tampa Bay, because Liam Cohen, props to the Jaguars for finally sacking up and getting rid of Balky and getting their guy Liam Cohen.
I guess. Better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, I know. Oh, you had the press conference. We just talked about how Dan Campbell and Nick Sirianni stunk at it. They're doing fine. Who cares?
Yeah, but come on, man. The aura was so
He didn't even have a bad press conference. He just had one funny line. The other stuff was pretty okay.
But it was that one quote that I know it means nothing, but I can't stop hearing Duval in the back. I can't stop hearing.
It's funny because he did it like other times for the social media like thing, like, "Hey, what's up, Jags fan?" And it was fine there.
Yeah, it didn't sound weird. I don't know why he said it like that.
I think it was just a bad line read.
Yeah,
actors do it all the time, but they get other takes. He didn't get a second take. Yep,
it's a shame, but he's not my.
What are you gonna do?
He's not my head coach, so I'll make fun of him for it.
Anyway, so Jacksonville's OC job Tampa Bay's OC job. Well,
Yeah.
Jacksonville's too, but Tampa Bay's OC job.
And that one, I think
open.
I think that's the most attractive OC job in the NFL. Literally,
Baker Mayfield, another weak division.
Their last two offensive coordinators got head coach jobs after 1 year.
Dave Canales in Carolina, and now Liam Cohen.
Canales was there 1 year, immediately got a head coaching job. Liam Cohen was there 1 year, immediately got a head coaching job.
And you get the added bonus of if they fire Todd Bowles and you're good, they're probably going to promote you anyway.
Exactly, because that's what Bucs fans have wanted the last two offensive coordinators they've had. They've wanted both Canales and Cohen to replace Bowles.
Especially Cohen.
And they probably would have. If the Bucs didn't make the playoffs this year, I think Bowles was fired and they're making Cohen the head coach. The issue is they made the playoffs, and I think they were like, wow, we can't fire Todd now. We can't fire him after this. If the Bucs miss the playoffs next year, whoever's their offensive coordinator, if he does a good job, if it's Nick Caley and he does a great job again, sure, they might make him the head coach.
So we say all that to say the Jets are firmly the third most attractive of those openings.
Yeah.
So because of that, Caley looks unlikely. The more likely candidate is the Detroit Lions guy, Tanner Engstrand.
Yes.
Who is currently the passing game coordinator for the Lions. Another San Diego State guy. He's from San Diego in that quarterback room with Darren Mougey and Kevin O'Connell.
Yep,
now, admittedly, that whole Hackett thing, so apparently it's easy to claim this, but apparently Mougey's number one choice was Kevin O'Connell because it's college, but it's his friend. Of course. Obviously, it's like Hugh Jackson's like, I actually wanted to take Patrick Mahomes, and he told me no. And I get all that, but then he goes to San Diego. With no state under Jim Harbaugh, actually.
Yes. San Diego, they have had a lot of successful coaches in the NFL.
I know that because in 2013 to 17, when I was at Marist College and they were in our conference, he was the assistant head coach and quarterbacks coach and OC. Oh. So I have seen a game in which Tanner Engstrand, I believe, won like 35-0 or something crazy.
Wow.
Because San Diego used to be the best team in the worst conference in all of football, the Pioneer Conference. It has teams from New York, Illinois, Iowa, Florida, South Carolina, California.
I did not realize Marist and San Diego were in the same conference.
Literally, that's when realignment happened, and then just a bunch of teams didn't have conferences, so it's the only Division I. Them and the Ivy League are the only non-scholarship D1 leagues.
That's a shame.
That's why there's no college players you ever hear of from there. Those are the only two.
San Diego's had some, haven't they?
Yeah, but occasionally, one every 3 years kind of thing. It's not like every year there's a guy.
Ross Dwelly. Oh, Jamal Agnew.
Jamal Agnew was from there. I think they had an offensive tackle was 6'10" 1 year.
Jesus Christ.
Daniel Cooney, I think was his name.
Eric Bakhtiari, the brother of David Bakhtiari. I didn't know
you finding this. But
I just went to Wikipedia.
Anyway. After that, he goes to Michigan again under Harbaugh. The DC Defenders of the XFL.
Yeah.
Then after that folded, he goes to the Lions. He was kind of thought to be the Ben Johnson successor as the offensive coordinator. Tight ends coach to passing game coordinator, just like Ben Johnson. And they thought, well, they're grooming him for the next offensive coordinator job. And I like that because you're getting a guy who's from the Dan Campbell tree. I guess that's a thing now, the Dan Campbell tree. Aaron Glenn knows him, probably likes him. Been around Ben Johnson. Passing games are always very creative, very efficient. I mean, Jared Goff is completing, 75% of his passes and throwing 40 touchdowns. You want to emulate that. Here's my one concern with Tanner Engstrand, other than the first-time stuff. But hey, Sean McVay was a first-time coach once upon a time.
Everyone's a first-time at one point.
My big concern is Dan Campbell had the opportunity to promote him, and he said, no, I'm hiring John Morton, former Jets OC John Morton, getting a second chance with it. Ben Johnson could have brought him to Chicago as his offensive coordinator. And he said, no, I'm going to hire 28-year-old Declan Doyle as his offensive coordinator. Now, again, Ben Johnson's calling plays. What's he going to do? By the way, do you remember that Iowa strength and conditioning coach that got fired for being racist? That's Declan Doyle's father.
It was Chris Doyle, right?
Chris. So, again, Declan's probably a nice guy. We don't want to put the sins of the father on the kid and all that, but that's his family.
Yeah.
So he had two chances to take premier offensive coordinator jobs, better than the Jets won. Chicago and Detroit, both of them told him no. So that's a concern for me. But also, you hire from successful trees. If you think this guy absorbed enough through osmosis to be the next Ben Johnson, then you take that chance. Especially if Caley's not coming, and you see names like Scott Turner in there. Of the names that are currently left, if Caley can't happen, I'd much prefer Tanner Engstrand coming in.
Yeah, Caley, the more I did digging into Caley, the more I was like, dang, I really want this guy. Like, I think he's going to be a really, really good offensive coordinator and probably a future head coach at this stage, especially if he goes to Tampa. It seems like it's almost a lock that he'll get some head coaching opportunity as long as he doesn't completely mess it up. But yeah, Engstrom.
Or else he doesn't Lance Newmarket.
Unless he doesn't.
Unless he gets Newmarked.
We should call it. That should be the new phrase for it, the new verb. He Newmarked it.
When you bungle an easy hire, he Newmarked it bad, man.
Yeah, but yeah, Engstrom's an interesting candidate. Obviously, the last 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, he's been working under Ben Johnson in Detroit. He's, I'm starting from the Ben Johnson coaching tree, if you want to call it that. Like, he was one of the top assistants under one of the supposed top offensive minds in the NFL. That's a good thing. You mentioned the red flag that he was passed over for both Ben Johnson's offensive coordinator job, which, that's somebody he worked very close with, and Ben Johnson opted not to hire him. And then, of course, they could have promoted him internally in Detroit, and they opted not to do that. They brought in John Morton, which was technically an external candidate as well. So that's definitely
He's been with them a little bit previously, but they passed him up.
Definitely a red flag, but I like his resume. I mean, working under Jim Harbaugh was very beneficial. Harbaugh actually brought him to Michigan briefly in 2018 when he was the head coach there for the Wolverines. So he brought him over. Obviously, was his coach at San Diego. Then he brought him over to Michigan. Fun fact, by the way, when the original XFL launched, the DC Defenders were my favorite team. So I've also watched some Tanner, not in person, but I've watched on TV some Tanner Engstrom-led offenses.
Cardell Jones was the quarterback.
Those offenses were pretty electric, man. I'm not gonna lie. For XFL standards, I mean, they had like Rashard Davis and
I mean, they don't have offensive linemen, so it's hard to,
Yeah, but it was fun. Those were fun offenses with Cardell Jones. I mean, that's Tanner Engstrom.
And the Lions was fun. Lions offense.
Obviously, yeah. Well, he wasn't the offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator.
I mean, he played. I assume he's not just picking his nose in the meetings. He's probably doing something.
No, I'm just saying his only experience that he's had as an offensive coordinator in the beyond college level was at the DC Defenders, and that offense was pretty fun. But yeah, I like him as a candidate. It is very interesting that not only does he have a connection to Aaron Glenn, obviously the Detroit connection, but he has a connection to Darren Mougey because, and this was a conversation, people, this was I don't know. People didn't realize this at first because Engstrom was technically there as a senior at San Diego State when Mougey was redshirted his freshman year. So they were not only were they teammates, they shared a quarterback room for one.
May have been a mentor for all we know.
Right. Engstrom, it's weird also talking about that Engstrom like older than Mougey because Engstrom 1 isn't even old. He's 42 years old, but Mougey is just extremely young. He's the third youngest general manager now in the NFL. But yeah,
He's younger than Mougey. He's only 39?
Andrew Berry in Cleveland, and then technically Ryan Poles by a couple of months.
Okay. They've been there for a while. They're really young.
Berry was hired very young by Cleveland.
I don't know if they're loving that right now.
Watson. I don't know how much Berry had say in that Watson deal. I don't know if that's ever come out, but yeah, I like
Johnson haters. It could always be Jimmy Haslam.
It could be. It could be Sean Khan. But yeah, I like Engstrom as a candidate as a fine contingency plan for Kelly. It seems like that's the direction that they're definitely going in. Because it sounds like they're probably going to miss out on Kelly. Would not be surprised if the next couple of days we hear that Tanner Engstrom's hired. It's impossible for you to know how good of an offensive coordinator he'll be, considering he's never done that beyond the XFL level. But I like his resume. Seems like a decent candidate, with the only red flag being that, yeah, he was passed over by both Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson. But I like him as an option. I also like the DC candidate that has been thrown out there, Mike, which is Steve Wilks.
I'm very much in on Steve Wilks.
Very, very happy. It sounds like from the beginning, that's kind of who Aaron Glenn was targeting. We were hearing reports of that as early as Tuesday, as early before Aaron Glenn was even hired, Tuesday of last week. There were reports that if/when Aaron Glenn were to be hired, he is eyeing Steve Wilks as a name for his defensive staff, likely as defensive coordinator. I love that hire.
They have interviewed Chris Harris, though. Not Chris Harris, the former Broncos quarterback, which I thought it was.
Different Chris Harris, former defensive back. Different Chris Harris.
He was the passing game coordinator and cornerbacks coach for the Tennessee Titans, which does not sound impressive, but that defense was actually kind of okay.
And it's interesting that they retained him after Callahan came in. It was kind of like their Tony Oden, essentially, where it's like, all right, this is a rising defensive backs coach who was able to survive multiple regimes. I don't love him as a defensive
Tony Oden went to the Titans, by the way. So
he did.
They might just swap.
Although he would be coming to the Jets, presumably as a. Well, actually, you know what? I wouldn't mind it if they just brought in Chris Harris as a DB's coach, because it sounds like he's not going to be able to get his job back in Tennessee, like you mentioned.
He sounds overqualified for a DB's coach, so I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, DB's coach, passing game coordinator. Give him the same role he had in Tennessee. That'd be cool with me. But yeah, I really like Steve Wilks as an option. If the Jets are going to go the inexperienced young route with an offensive coordinator, which it sounds like they're going to, I would love to bring in an experienced defensive coordinator, a guy who has head coach experience multiple times. Steve Wilks has been a head coach and an interim head coach at the NFL level. He's won, been to or won 3 different Super Bowls as a coordinator. I think
I went with Carolina. He went with the Niners.
Yeah, and then he was as a DB's coach. He went with somebody else. I'm forgetting, but he's been to 3 different Super Bowls. I remember seeing that earlier. But either way, a lot of experience. Has experience.
The Bears when they had Lovie Smith.
The Bears, yes, has recent experience as a defensive coordinator and also did a really good job. I know he was fired after 1 year in San Francisco. I thought he did an excellent job that 1 year. I mean, the numbers themselves, the Niners ranked 8th in total defense. They ranked 3rd in rush defense, 14th in pass defense. They had the 3rd most sacks, 2nd most interceptions. They were tied in 2023 for the highest PFF defensive grade for a team defense, tied with the Jets, by the way. So very, very good defense in San Francisco.
And I thought the second time in Carolina, I thought he was pretty good. He had to be the interim coach for Matt Rule too. I thought he was pretty good there. The Arizona head coach, I don't even hold that against. I mean, it was Gerard Mayo. They gave him nothing. It was a bad situation.
I want experienced coaches on this staff because it sounds like the Jets, the Jets have already gone with a first-time head coach, first-time general manager. Give me guys in both on offense and on defense who have been there before, who have done it, who maybe it's a little past their time to be a head coach. Like if they bring in a Todd Haley, which has been thrown out there, which is a crazy name that I haven't heard in years, I would love that. Bring in guys like that. Bring in a Steve Wilks to be the defensive coordinator.
It seems very Jeremy Bates. Like bring this guy in after or Changeli, bring him in after 6 years of doing nothing.
As long as he's not the OC, that's fine. The issue is they made Changeli and Jeremy Bates offensive coordinator. But I have no issue with Todd Haley as offensive assistant or whatever. Steve Wilks being the defensive coordinator takes a lot of responsibility off Aaron Glenn's plate, allows him to focus on being a head coach. He can put a little bit more effort and attention into focusing on the offense as well, because Steve Wilks can handle that defense. He's got that. Whereas if you need, Tanner Engstrand or a young offensive mind, he needs a little bit more attention there. I think you could do that because you have that experienced guy on defense. So I'm all for Steve Wilks. I hope they bring in him as a defensive coordinator. If not, I'd love a defensive or an experienced defensive guy there as opposed to another younger first-time defensive coordinator.
The best thing you can do for building a sustainable winner is hiring coordinators that are great at their job and have no shot at being a head coach.
Right.
Look at Kansas City. Matt Nagy, only the Jets were even thinking about Matt Nagy. No one else is looking to bring him away right now.
Spags is the best example.
Steve Spagnuolo, I saw this tweet going out. I think it may have been one of Dove Kleiman's few good tweets where he said, or somebody else where they said, like, he may have a good case to be the first assistant coach in the Hall of Fame because Steve Spagnuolo has a very good case. Maybe Bud Carson with the Steelers, maybe, who did that steel curtain defense. Mm-hmm. They have a very good case to be the best coordinators I think I've ever seen.
Yep.
I know Josh McDaniels has more rings, but, I mean, come on. Who's a better coordinator, Josh McDaniels or Steve Spagnuolo?
You want a guy like Spags, like a
and nobody. I mean, the Jets gave him an interview. The Raiders looked at him for like 2 seconds this year, but after that Rams stint, nobody's really looked at him as a viable head coach. All he gets to do is just hang back and make life hell and just like the fact no one's even thinking about taking Steve Spagnuolo. Like hypothetically, if the Jets end up being good because of this, and they get Steve Wilks, who's been a head coach, hired to be one and an interim one twice. Not particularly good at either. So there's not going to be a ton of interest in him as a head coach. If he just stays in that position for however long and he puts up like San Francisco level results, I mean, that's the dream. Like that is a fear. Like, oh, we have this good OC guy, and then literally all they need is 1 year of success and they'll get head coached by Liam Cohen. 1 year of success can get you a head coaching job. You nail a defensive coordinator hire. You can get that guy for 5 years, 10 years if you want.
And that was a lot of the issue with that Robert Saleh staff. He really struggled to get experienced names on that staff, especially in recent years. Look at this past year. The only other guy with head coaching experience on the entire staff, either offense or defense, was Nathaniel Hackett. And that was barely head coach experience. I mean, their offensive staff was very, very bad. I don't think any of them had even been an offensive coordinator before, besides Downing. Right,
LaFleur though, I'll give him credit because
LaFleur.
Everybody would have he was the next guy up, and you know what? Looks pretty okay with the Rams. I know McVay calls the plays, but looks like he's doing okay. He'll get another shot at some point calling plays.
Yeah, I mean, was Sean Jefferson ever offensive coordinator? No, he
I
wasn't.
don't think he was. No.
So yeah,
Great player, but no.
This year, obviously they had their own struggles bringing in offensive coaches because of the Rodgers and Hackett situation. But that was one of the shortcomings and one of the disastrous points of Robert Saleh's tenure was he just could not put together a competent, especially offensive staff. But bringing in a guy like Steve Wilkes to run the defense, he has that head coach experience. I'm all for it. I would love to make that hire. They are bringing him in for an interview tonight as we speak. I hope it gets done. I haven't heard his name thrown out there with any other teams, right? I haven't missed that, I don't think. So I don't think there's other teams that are necessarily sniffing around. And almost, I don't want to say it feels like a foregone conclusion because I would have said that about Lance Newmark at one point, but it certainly seems like the Jets are in the driver's seat to land him. And if your coordinators are Tanner Engstrand and Steve Wilkes, I'm happy with that. I think that's a good first coordinator set.
Brian Sternbeck says, there's no association with Glenn that I can see, but Leslie Frazier fits the bill of has experience, will travel for DC. I would like that. The problem, I think Leslie Frazier is currently attached. I think he's the assistant head coach of the Seahawks. So you'd have to probably be an assistant head coach with the Jets and make a lateral move, which would be tough. But yeah, in a perfect world, I think Leslie Frazier could have been a pretty good hire.
That was a weird situation because he was the DC in Buffalo, and then he
lost play calling. McDermott took it over.
That's what it was. And then I remember him, he left and it was on weird terms, and then he went to Seattle. That's the type of person you want in that. Like I said, like a Vic Fangio, a Steve Spagnuolo, someone who, like you said, Mike, is not going to get head coaching opportunities probably at this stage of their career, but is a damn good coach, a damn good defensive coordinator, and somebody you want in any coaching room.
And with that, I think we're going to wrap up this episode of the Jet Press. First one of the new era, of the Aaron Glenn era, of the Darren Mougey era, which I know we felt this way probably the beginning of the Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh eras, but that excuse our youthful naivete. And also, if you want to compare and contrast what those two look like going in with these two, now granted, a lot more hair on the head this time. Maybe that's the key. It's not all chrome domes this time.
Yeah, they had too many bald guys in the last regime. That was their issue.
Hackett, Saleh, Douglas.
To imagine Rodgers bald.
Bald Aaron Rodgers, just straight shiny, no stubble, even just straight.
But if I could
Mr. Clean bald, like Robert Saleh bald.
I could totally see him doing that. Like what if he not only shaved his head? Yeah, he shaved his head, but his beard too. Like just full on, just clean shaved everything.
Oh no, the beard would be too far. Like he just, because I remember when he was young coming in, he didn't have the beard.
Yeah.
Look at like a young Aaron Rodgers and then Robert Saleh's head. I don't know. I can't get behind that.
Yeah, no. Now that was the issue. The Jets had too many bald guys. No more bald guys. That's got to be the 2025 New Year's resolution of the Jets.
No, we have a very hirsute leadership right now.
Hirsute? What does that mean?
It means that you're hairy.
Why do you know that? How do you spell
that? It's a word. It's vocabulary.
Hirsute, hairy. Example sentence. They're hirsute chests. All right. Thanks for sharing.
I think it means like body hair more than head hair, but still.
Yeah, I guess. Sure.
Bald Rodgers is just tall Joe Rogan.
I don't like the symbol.
That works in a lot of ways.
I don't like the synonyms for hirsute it gives me. Hairy, shaggy, bushy. All right, we can move on.
So while Justin amuses himself, I'll say thank you guys for tuning into the Jet Press podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there. YouTube, like, subscribe, do all that. As big as Pal says, bald Aaron Rodgers, put that on a T-shirt.
Please. I'm glad
if you want to do it, fine. I don't.
I'm glad you did.
Some things aren't meant for this world.
I'm glad you said hirsute and not bushy. If you said the Jets were bushy, I don't know how I feel.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, that'd be a little too. It's going off the getting a little blue.
This is the rated R portion of the stream, as it always ends up being. But yeah,
the adults only portion.
Look, well, we can leave you with this. As Aaron Glenn said, put your seatbelts on, get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, and we're built for this shit. And now I'm pumped up because just reading those words got me pumped.
If that doesn't get you pumped up, man, go check some stuff out. If you're a Jets fan and you don't get pumped up by that,
I'm scared, dude.
Pulse, man.
I'm scared. I'm feeling emotions about the Jets again. I was so checked out for so long, and now I'm excited again. I'm feeling things.
Saleh's more like, okay, this is cool. Aaron Glenn's like, yeah. I think that's the difference.
Like, what if this doesn't work? Mike, what if this fails too?
Then everything else fails. So you just throw it on the fire.
I don't want to get hurt again.
Too bad. You already made the commitment. So
you're right. Look, at least we're getting paid to get hurt if we get hurt. But anyway, Thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow Mike on Twitter at @MikeLuciano. Follow me on Twitter at Justin T. Fried. Follow the Jet Press at the Jet Press. Download the Jet Press podcast wherever you get podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, like, hit the notification bell. You guys know what to do. You can also subscribe and become a member. Thank you one more time to Connor Long for donating 10 memberships earlier today. It is only 99 cents. You can subscribe, and it really helps support the show. And you also get your comments prioritized in chat. Much appreciated. Ambassador Woody Johnson, see you again after this fails too. We'll see you, Woody. Thanks for stopping by, Ambassador. But yeah, much appreciated.
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you so much again to Connor. Definitely check out his stuff and appreciate everybody who tunes in and watches. We stream live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all for listening to Jet Press Podcast. I've been Justin Fried. That is Mike Luciano. See you guys next time.
Welcome to the Aaron Glenn and Darren Mougey era. See how it goes.